right. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is David Prescott, and Jonathan, I assume you will tell me if there's any technical things happening. Hold on just one second as I turn on my webcam. Okay, hope you all can see me. So welcome. Again, my name is David Prescott. I'll be hosting this webinar with some of my absolutely favorite people and working with one of my favorite organizations, Neary Press. And Neary Press has been around since, I think, the early 1990s in one form or another. The thing that I've always appreciated about Neary Press and the training center and everything else at Neary is that Neary's always been at the forefront of trying to figure out what are the best ways to get information out to as many professionals as possible, whether that be in webinar format or various kinds of online trainings. And of course, Neary also is a force behind the now sort of internationally renowned MASOC conference that happens in Massachusetts every April. So it is great to be here, and I'm going to see about advancing this slide. So Jonathan, I'm not able to make it advance. Perhaps you could advance it for me. Thanks so much. So let's start with the ever important learning objectives. As always, there are three of them. Participants will understand the importance of the responsivity principle in treatment for persons with sexual behavior problems. Number two is review a model of collaborative program development, ensuring client buy-in. And then number three is consider the benefits of a framework in which treatment providers and clients demonstrate reciprocal respect and therapeutic engagement. We don't have a lot of time to cover this material today, and there's many of us that are taking part in it. So I'm going to step away pretty much as quickly as I can. However, I just have to say that even just reading these objectives, it's very clear that although we have a short time together, we could all spend a lifetime mastering the items just in these objectives themselves. So let me introduce the speakers. Jonathan, if you can advance to the next slide, that'd be great. Here we go. Some friends and colleagues and sometimes co-presenters, Robin Wilson and Michelle Burns, who will be leading us. And then next we have, if you can advance to the next slide. Thank you, Erin Breezy, Marcia McQueen. She seems to be Marcia Lee in print, but Marcia when talking during the preparation. And of course, Susie Sturton also joining us. So these four women are in Ontario right now. Robin is coming to us from his home office in Florida, and I'm coming to you also from my home office in the area outside of Portland, Maine. So with that, I'll turn it over to you folks, and can't wait to hear what you have to say.
My webcam, there we go. All right, I'm just gonna move this over out of my way. Okay, so I'm very happy to have all of you online today. It's a very exciting thing for us. Just a little bit about who we are. So we are here on this webinar today as members of Peel Behavioral Services, which is a program of a large, at this point at least, a large multi-site hospital complex in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, also known as the Trillium Health Partners. Just a little bit of personal history myself. This is my hometown, actually. Mississauga is where I grew up, and the so-called Trillium Health Partners, one of the main hospital sites was originally known as the South Peel Hospital, and that's where I had my tonsils out when I was 6, where I had these stitches when I was 5 and these stitches when I was 6. So those are the, that's my link to the hospital. Many years later, I ended up being involved with Peel Behavioral Services, but I have a long history with the hospital in South Mississauga, I suppose, at this point, down by Lake Ontario. So the PBS service, which is what we call Peel Behavioral Services, has been around for nearly 40 years, which means that it started before I graduated from high school. So it's a long-standing service for people with intellectual disabilities and sexual behavior problems, and a whole host of other sorts of issues, people who have various kinds of cognitive limitations. In the more recent past, PBS has become one of the premier, I think, behavioral services for people with intellectual disabilities, and especially around the sexual behavior issue. And they have a wonderful partnership, I should say we have a wonderful partnership with a number of different sort of housing organizations who provide a place for our residents to live while we're doing various treatment options. Okay, so we have a new book, which is, I suppose, the reason why we're doing this today. So this book is called Passport to Independence, A Good Lives Workbook. And essentially what it is a collection of exercises that people who are running a Good Lives model-oriented program could go to and say, for instance, you wanted to do something about being good at work, sort of excellence in work. And you didn't quite know how you could do that with your clients. You could go to our workbook here, go to that section, look it up, and we have 4 or 5 different exercises that you could choose from. You could, I suppose, use this book as an actual curriculum. It's not really how we originally intended it, but since it's been released, we are aware that there are some people who are using it that way, and we have absolutely no difficulty with that. So we have a large number of people who worked on this. So most of them fall under the heading of Peel Behavioral Services. Somehow I got to have my name on here by myself. I'm a little bit, embarrassed by that, I suppose. But anyhow, so we have a lot of people, and you'll be meeting some of them very, very soon. So what I wanted to do is just sort of frame things first. By this point, most programs around the United States and Canada and into the UK and other places that do things kind of relatively similarly to how we do them, most of those programs are underscored by the risk-need responsivity model, which is a good thing. And I think all of us can probably say that much. The risk principle talks about who we should target, and we know that we give our best resources to the people who pose the greatest risk. That's where the most intensive services go. With respect to the need principle, this tells us what we should target. And pretty typically it's the stuff that got them into trouble, the reason why they're in service in the first place. There are other things that we might want them to gain overall in the long run, but the first thing we need to do is to help them stop getting in trouble. But it's the responsivity principle that we want to focus on mostly today, because it's certainly been my observation, and I know David has noticed this as well, that this is the one principle of the R&R model that seems to fall apart at times, or that people maybe don't quite understand exactly what it means to be a truly responsive program. And this talks about how we target people for intervention. And what this means is that you have to take into consideration those idiosyncratic elements of the people in service to make sure that we're truly meeting their needs, so as to help them to learn what they need to learn so that they can stop getting in trouble and be able to live that balanced and self-determined lifestyle that we all basically aspire to. So the focus on responsivity for us is that we want to make sure that people have case management frameworks and sexual violence prevention that make sure that we focus on risk and need, but that we don't forget about making sure that the program is something that the clients can understand, that they can take something away from, and that they can really do their best in. So we want to make sure that the clients of treatment feel like they're partners in this endeavor, and that this isn't something that's being done to them, that it's more something being done with them. We know that the Therapeutic Alliance and motivation for clients are really critically important, and that they're linked to one another. That if you have a strong therapeutic alliance, that your clients are going to be demonstrating more motivation, and they're going to be learning what they can to make sure that they can, have that good life that we're going to be talking about. So we want to make sure that our clients can get all they can from treatment. And I think that the onus is on us, at least at first, to make sure that we're providing them with those opportunities. Ultimately, clients have to take responsibility for their own part in treatment, but we have to make sure that the door is open and that there is, someone welcoming on the other side of that door. So I'm going to hand it over to my partners now and let them do their thing.
So hello everyone. Our Passport to Independence workbook that Robin was indicating is based on the Good Lives model. So what is the Good Lives model? It's a treatment approach that focuses on the individual's whole life in a holistic manner and less on their past or their present inappropriate behaviors. It also assists the individual in determining what is most important in their life, and it also provides concrete and systematic strategies on how to pursue and achieve one's goals in a safe and positive way. What it consists of is 10 long-term goals. Each of these long-term goals are then broken down into short-term, more achievable goals. And these short-term goals help an individual work towards that long-term goal that they have for themselves. Each person is very unique, and therefore their goals and the methods of achieving their individual goals are specific to the person that we're targeting and that we're supporting. And below are a number of different icons that we used for each one of the 10 chapters that represent the 10 long-term goals in the book. Why did we choose to use the Good Lives model? Well, the clients had identified a desire to become more independent and determine the goals they required to succeed in their lives. As I stated already before, the Good Lives model has a very holistic approach looking at a person's whole life. And again, it focuses on future goals as opposed to solely ruminating on past offenses or inappropriate behaviors. And the Good Lives model has allowed the individual to build their own self-confidence. So the Good Lives model also reinforces what we here at PBS use for our treatment guidelines. And what I mean by this is that we encourage individuals to reach their goals that they have for themselves, and we've always reinforced that it must be done in a safe way to avoid risk and harm to themselves or others. The Good Lives model also provides a more structured way of meeting their goals and allows the person to know that their goals are actually achievable. It demonstrates potential challenges that they might come across, and it gives possible solutions on how to overcome these challenges.
Michelle, can you turn on your webcam?
Were we not on the whole time?
No.
I thought he said he was going.
He said he could.
It's all good. We can hear you just fine, and that's really the most important thing.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So hi, here's Michelle. We were under the assumption that our camera would be turned on, so I've now turned it on. Anyhow, hello. So I'm on the slide in terms of adapting or making modifications to the Good Lives model. So what we did was we used terminology consistent with other treatment workbooks that the clients have used in the past and for which they were already therefore familiar with. So for example, the term goods we changed into goals. The term primary and secondary goods, which the Good Lives model used, we changed to long and short-term goals. And the terminology such as flaws, the individuals were much more familiar with roadblocks, so we changed that to roadblocks.
So how did we implement the Good Lives model here at PBS? So first, a number of staff went to some training on the Good Lives model facilitated through one of our sister agencies. We then brought that back to our agency and introduced all of our clients to the Good Lives model. So They were able to give us a lot of feedback on what they liked and didn't like about it. Our clients were never shy with giving feedback. They let us know that it didn't hold their attention. It wasn't client-centered, very repetitive, so the same things were covered over and over again in each goal. And another feedback that they gave us is that it wasn't visual enough for them. So a lot of our clients are very visual learners, and they wanted to see more visual components to their learning. So we then took their feedback and put it all together, and we finalized our curriculum, which we called Passport to Independence. So in a group format, we took all of that curriculum that we created, and we provided all of that to our clients. We did do in-the-moment modifications. As I said before, our clients were never shy about giving feedback. So in the moment, they'd give us feedback about whether they liked it or didn't like it, or how we should do things better. And then at the end of the group, the participants completed their Passport to Independence. And they were able to present that to the whole group and share what they had learned, what they liked about the curriculum, and all the different goals that they wanted to set for themselves. So we encouraged them to have feedback throughout the whole process. And again, at the very end, we did provide them with a formal feedback survey, which we collected at the end of the group. Also, work was completed in their one-to-one sessions. These goals that they worked towards and that they set were incorporated into their treatment plans.
So since starting to implement the curriculum into their daily life, our clients have consistently been able to provide us with how the GLM model and how our curriculum has helped them. They feel that they have an increased quality of life because they're being engaged in more meaningful activities with concrete plans for their future. They have a hope for a better life, increased independence, especially when it comes to the opportunities for vocational settings and accessibility to the community. Increased motivation and confidence. They feel that the workbook is more client-centered, which means that they're focused on what they can do and what they want to do, as opposed to what staff in some situations or others feel that they or want for them. They feel it has reduced their number of behavioral and mental health concerns. They feel like their life is more fulfilled in terms of having more satisfaction in what they do, and not just based on day-to-day things that happen in their facilities where they may live, but they also have long-term goals now to focus on. They're better able to identify barriers, problem solve, and potentially overcome these barriers, because when they set their goals, they use the SMART model, so they're able to focus back on if they do have any barriers, they're able to go back and we kind of revamp the way they have set their goals and make them more achievable for them, so they don't give up. We collaborate with the mediators, so the individual social supports are actually educated, that's specifically family and staff, regarding the Passport to Independence. So along the way, they know what their family members or what their clients are working on. We hold meetings with the individual and their social support so we can discuss their progress, where they are in terms of reaching their goal, any challenges or barriers, roadblocks, and their successes, so that we can all assist and support them along the way. We work with community partners when needed. So for example, vocational and volunteer opportunities. We'll go out into these settings that the client has expressed interest in maybe working or volunteering at, and we speak with the people there in order to see if they could support them in some way and in setting these goals. We create support plans that assist individuals in meeting their goals. So Marsha will speak to that in a minute. We could provide healthy relationship counseling, the private time agreement, like Marsha will also mention in a moment. So of course, there were some challenges along the way that they came across. One big one is affordability. Of course, many of our clients live on a fixed income, and so it's difficult sometimes for them to be able to save enough money to go on vacation, or to even get a passport to go on vacation, or for their schooling. So definitely financial challenges have been one. Mediator buy-in. Not all support staff agree with the goals that the clients have set for themselves, and so we need to ensure that they will still support them and explain why it is important to the client. Lack of resources or opportunities. So transportation is a big one for them, for sure. And here where we live in Ontario, employment is difficult to find sometimes, especially with clients with an intellectual disability. Lack of follow through. So that's for the mediator and the client sometimes. So transportation, for example, might be an issue. So lack of follow through might be difficult. Or depending on, what the client is facing, they might actually not attend scheduled shifts that they might have to work, or just their inability to wait. So sometimes, for example, if they have to wait to afford going to school, their lack of follow through might really be the cause of having to wait so long to save. Their lack of motivation to self-initiate, definitely mental health sometimes plays a role in that. Lack of available support, so sometimes with the staff turnover rate, the continuity becomes a challenge for them as well. And of course, various levels of cognitive functioning as we support people who have low to quite high IQs, and sometimes it impedes on them moving forward and advancing. So the goal needs to be broken down even further. And then of course, there have been many successes. So clients have reported their enhanced motivation to accomplish their goals. They feel better supported, they feel like they can do it. They now have concrete goals that they've set to work on, more structured ways to meet their realistic goals, a better understanding as to what they want in life, because prior to actually doing this curriculum with them, some of them admit that they haven't really been asked they know they're in a treatment setting, they know that they're in a treatment program, but they haven't really thought far beyond that. What's possible for me and what can I do? They have the assistance from others on how to meet their goals from staff and family. Increased independence, community access is a big one for them. And they still have a reduced risk because regardless of what goals they set for themselves, they're always in alignment with the treatment so that they can access these goals in a safe manner. And a lot of times our clients say they're motivated to achieve their goals more than they're motivated or their desire to actually engage in inappropriate behaviors and get in trouble with the law, for example. More balanced and self-determined lifestyle, because the focus is not just on treatment, they're actually achieving goals as well while they're in treatment, and which provides them with a more positive outlook on their future.
So we're going to go into using Passport to Independence, and we're going to provide 2 examples of the individuals we support and in terms of how they use the Passport to Independence to achieve their goal. So the first one here is a personal choice and independence. And this individual wanted to get his driver's license. So one of the things that we try to teach our clients is to understand the importance of achieving their goals over time by breaking them down into smaller short-term goals leading to their long-term goal. So the short-term goals for this particular long-term goal is as follows. So to save money for a written test and driver's education. So this individual had to really understand the importance of, the amount of funds that he would have to save towards this goal. Studying for a written test and also receiving assistance from staff members to study for the written test. Write and pass written tests for learner's permit. Complete driver's education. Complete and pass road tests to acquire full license. And of course, education on the need for insurance and budgeting and being realistic about purchasing a vehicle. This is an individual that lives in a residential treatment home. So it's important for us to be realistic with them about achieving these long-term goals. So we're moving on to the next slide, the roadblocks. A lack of skills was definitely a roadblock. Safety concerns due to this individual's difficulty in processing road signs while driving. So cognitive functioning, his cognitive functioning level and just concerns around his memory definitely became a challenge and an impediment. Lack of attention while driving, which is another safety concern. Lack of opportunity and resources. So, he was not able to afford a vehicle. He wasn't able to afford insurance and repairs and gas, etc. So all these things were realistic challenges that we had to speak to the individual about. And the last one on this specific category is lack of access to a vehicle to practice. Again, he lives in a treatment home and he wasn't able to drive the vehicle at the treatment home. He wasn't able to afford, rental. And so these are, again, challenges that we have to talk about. So the end result is he obtained initial license, but was unable to get his full license due to the roadblocks that were discussed. And it's important to understand that even though our individuals have these long-term goals, they may not completely achieve the goals, but they may complete it to a certain degree. So moving on to the next example. This individual, his long-term goal was relatedness, and his goal was to have a healthy and intimate relationship with his girlfriend. Short-term goals leading to the long-term goal: attend relationship counseling sessions with his girlfriend, and this was actually facilitated by us, and it's for them to really understand what a healthy relationship was all about in order to have a long and lasting relationship. So we covered things such as boundaries and consent and a lot of other important components to a healthy relationship. We help them to go on shorter dates with the help and support of and supervision of mediators such as staff and family members. And then that gradually increased into longer dates. So they would start going on coffees, and that would lead to a restaurant outing, and then maybe dinner and a movie. So again, it's a step-by-step process. Gradually fading out mediator supervision and support. Actually, right now we're working on creating a trust program to give them even more independent time in the community without staff supervision. For supportive counseling, working through levels of intimacy that they're both comfortable with. So helping them to understand their boundaries and working out areas of intimacy that they're comfortable with in each stage of their relationship. Testing for STIs was something that they wanted to do before they became physically intimate. So that was something that was that we helped them to just understand what that would take and the steps to achieve that. And then purchasing of birth control. In the early stages of the relationship, it was identified that having children was not an option for both of them. And so we had to talk about the importance of birth control and the affordability of it moving forward. So moving on to the next slide, roadblocks. So we had to discuss the need to follow through or follow treatment guidelines and protocols which impacted their ability to engage in certain activities. So the client that we support, he has certain guidelines that he has to follow, which may, limit places in which they can go to in the community and activities that they can do. So these are things that we have to speak about. Seeing each other as often as they would like was at times challenging due to staff availability, because staff, has to support other gentlemen in the home. Lack of opportunity for privacy, where to engage in sexual intimacy was a challenge. Our client, again, lives in a residential treatment home. His girlfriend lives with her sister, and they both weren't really comfortable, being intimate in either setting. Saving money for a motel to have private time, because that was an option that we threw out, being that they weren't comfortable being intimate at the group home or at his girlfriend's sister's home. So again, affordability became a bit of a challenge where that is concerned to engage in sexual intimacy. The end result is that the client's parents offered their home as a private place for them to engage in sexual intimacy. And this actually was very beneficial for both of them. It's something that they do up to this day. And they have date nights, and they even have sleepovers at his parents' home. Both are extremely happy in their relationship, and they're committed to each other. They say that they're each other's soulmate. And they continue to consult with PBS as questions and issues arises. So we don't necessarily have couples counsel, or should I say healthy relationship counseling ongoing, but we're there as the support is needed. And just to conclude with future goals before we go into our Q&A, we're constantly evolving the passport, and we continue to make modifications as needed. Thank you.
Okay, so folks, one of the things that I should have said up at the beginning, and I didn't, and I just sort of reminded myself as we were going through, the Peel Behavioral Service provides treatment and kind of residential support to people with intellectual disabilities and other cognitive limitations. And they were the population with whom we originally developed this workbook. But when we were writing it up to send off to NERI for eventual publication, we were very careful to make sure that we didn't limit ourselves to solely that population. And although the examples today have been about folks from the ID population, we have written the exercises such that they can be used by anyone who has sexual behavior problems, regardless of what their intellectual capacity is. Certainly in my experience over the last number of years, it's been pretty clear to me that even people who are not necessarily having kind of cognitive limitations appreciate language being simple and clear to understand, and that's what we strove to do with this workbook. So sorry, David, I just wanted to throw that one little bit in there before I forgot.
Well, I really appreciate it, Robin. Maybe if we can start our Q&A from that point. You've really worked hard to put this together, and you've done this in a context in which, in the old days, we used to complain about the juvenile world, that it was mostly filled with models that had been imported from the adult world. And I think, hold on, I'm just going to try to share my webcam here, if I can. Here we go. All right, hopefully that works. And then, we've also talked at various times about how much the adult world could learn from folks like you who work directly with intellectually disabled people. So I guess now that you've produced this, now that it's out in the public and you guys have gotten feedback, what are some of the additional uses for this workbook that you've seen? You've mentioned that it isn't necessarily an entire treatment program, although a treatment program could be centered around it. What other kinds of things have you learned?
Well, certainly some of the feedback that I've had is that people are using it with their clients in individual treatment as a means to, sort of highlight certain areas that clients are having difficulties. It also has been, I know that there are a number of programs out there who have bought, reasonably large number of copies. Thank you for that. Should note that all the proceeds of this book, as far as PBS is concerned, all go back into the program for further curriculum development. So neither me nor Michelle or Aaron or Susie or Marcia gets any money from this. We're all, we got paid, I suppose, while we were at work doing this, but in terms of sales of the book, all of the money goes back into the program. So there are a number of sort of large scale programs out there as well who are also using this as part of their group curriculum. And I think it's, the feedback I've had has been overwhelmingly positive. People are really appreciative of the opportunity to go and find an exercise. Say you're talking about a certain topic in group this week, you really don't know how to get it started. You're looking for something that you can do to help drive home the point. And, going to the Passport curriculum has really helped them out in terms of being able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Hey, I also just want to mention to the audience too, please don't be shy about asking your questions. You can enter a question into the question box area there. I have that open. You can also type into the chat. I see that somebody else has already prompted me to invite questions from the audience. So please, let's make this as much of a discussion as we can, even though I could talk with these folks all day long, and on more than a few occasions I actually have. So I guess it's not a question, it's more a comment than anything else, that I personally find it deeply refreshing to have a webinar from folks who are actually doing the work day in and day out and who know the population that they work with, as well as you folks do at PBS. Thank you for coming on board today. And I guess at a more idealistic level, it really impresses me, and I think it ought to be a real call to the rest of our profession that you guys incorporated your own clients so much in the development of this workbook. That is, I just happen to think that that's about, that's not just producing a collaborative model of treatment, that's using the same collaborative model to build the model. And that's, I just am deeply impressed by that and want to say thank you going forward. I guess well, Robin, there is one question here. Robin said that this isn't a curriculum per se, but how can it be used in a way that is not a curriculum? That's a very interesting question. Robin or anyone else?
Yeah. Do any of my four partners want to have some say on this?
Well, I think it's what you already alluded to, Robin. It's that you don't have to go from, beginning to end of the book and just do it as one piece by piece, but you use it as a resource to spark your own ideas about different things, and or work with your individual that you're doing and spark some dialogue and some discussion about how do we look at these different types of goals, because within the 10 goals, it really encompasses a person's whole life. So it's a tool that can just sort of be a launching pad to think about other ways of attaining your goals. What are your goals, looking at them? So I don't think it needs to be, like Robin said, used from beginning to end and follow sequentially along. Pick and choose what you want, what resonates with you, with your client at the time. Does that answer the question a little bit?
I think so. And taking it a step further and thinking about this idea of responsivity as well as risk and need, I guess my question would also be, so what I saw in the slides were these really positive examples, just great case examples. And I'm interested in, how do you guys end up linking the approach goals, if you will, that you're working towards with the dynamic risk factors that your clients are presenting with? Are they two sides of the same coin, or do you approach them as different entities?
So I'll say something, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. But with the population that we originally developed these exercises, so if you think about the issue of the guy who wanted to have a relationship, this was a long process for him. When we first started working with him, he had a lot of very inappropriate fantasies, some of which included fixations on sort of TV and film personalities, and a lot of sort of quasi, not necessarily psychotic, but some kind of delusional thinking about the nature of the relationships. And this was really what got him into a lot of trouble. So over a long process of working through what it is to have a need to be with someone, who is a reasonable person, these are all kind of approaching having the kind of lifestyle and the kind of relationship that he can see in other people, and that he essentially aspires to himself. And just to be really clear, we didn't just sort of open up a dating service and say, okay, to this fellow, we're going to get you a girlfriend and we're going to make sure you get laid. That wasn't the point at all. I mean, this was all very, very clinically defensible, the sort of thing where we took it step by step by step to make sure that he understood where he was at in that process, and that he knew what the next step was so that he could work towards it. And I think, I just want to make sure that people understand some of these things, whether your client is ID or not, it has to be a very, very thoughtful clinical process with baby steps that gets them moving forward towards each bit of the process that ultimately leads to them, getting what they want. In this case, this fellow dearly wanted to have a relationship, and over, really probably years with him, we were able to get him there.
Nice.
Any of my four colleagues want to jump in?
No, I think that's a really good point, Robin, in the sense that, in the sense of a webinar, it comes across as if this was done very quickly. You're right, Robin. This was done over many, many years. And when I just sat here listening to you and reflecting back how long this took and how fulfilling it is for all of us, I think, as obviously them as well, he himself and his girlfriend, how we've gotten to this point and how we've really reduced the deviant thinking, fantasies, desires to something that is so meaningful to them. And as Marcia said, they identify each other as their soulmates. But this was a very clear, laid out process. With each process, if I should say, so you have your long-term goal, we had your short-term goals, but I would even say that within each short-term goal, there was mini goals in those because it was broken down into trust programs that had very defined steps to meet in order to, then you met that criteria, then you could get to the next part of the goal. It was, I just want to say, it was a long process, but a meaningful process, very systematically done, ensuring that his risk to himself and the community, and that she understood what the dynamics of that meant to their relationship, was all very openly discussed and identified. Marcia?
Yes, absolutely.
So thanks for that clarity, Robin, on that it's a long, long process.
Yeah, and one of the other points that I would make about that as well is that that we try to be very enterprising, you know, in our service. We try to push limits. You know, we try to do things that are ultimately centered on you know, client quality of life. And where there is a kind of clinically defensible reason to do something, we've certainly done that. People who have come to our talks at ATSA will know that we've looked at sex aids, we've done all sorts of alternative stuff, because ultimately that moves our clients towards some degree of healthy sexuality and away from the stuff that was getting them in trouble before. And you know, at times we've taken some flack for that. I mean, the example we gave today was one where there was you know, it was a young man and a young woman. We've also had some situations where we've had two guys who want to be in a relationship with one another, and we took a very similar stance and a very similar approach to that, and wanted to make sure that we weren't just being, you know, sort of heterocentric or whatever, but you know, with clients with intellectual disabilities and clients who are gay and clients who have at times perhaps some weird and wacky ideas about sex that are maybe not unhealthy, but certainly maybe a little non-traditional. We've tried very, very hard to make sure that we're focused on client quality of life and not in looking for other barriers. If it doesn't hurt anybody, if everybody is consenting, and if everybody's moving forward in their life, we view that as a positive thing. But we have taken some flack.
Sure. Okay. Oh, sorry. Were you folks going to add something?
No, we
Right,
just chuckled at the fact that we've taken some flack. It's true.
Oh, yeah. I don't see how you don't attract some flack somewhere in this process. Let me just, I've got a couple of other questions coming in, but let me just make sure that I understand. So when the Good Lives model first came out and people started looking at these Good Lives goals, a lot of times they were seen as being the flip side of risk factors. So for example, the person who has a great deal of a sexual attraction to children is naturally going to have some difficulty forming connections and relationships in his life. And you guys have given a very nice example of that. And what I'm hearing you say, and I just want to make sure that I understand, is that another way of looking at it is that by working with all of these approach goals within the Good Lives model, this will enable you to have some very serious conversations about dynamic risk factors, plain and simple. Is that what I'm getting?
Robin, can you take
I'll
over?
let my four colleagues answer that.
No, can you go? Sorry, we just timed out. Can you answer that, Robin? I apologize. I was more concerned about, we timed out. Did anybody notice the fact that my laptop went off?
I heard something. I was hoping it wasn't me.
I'm sorry, David, could you answer the question one more time? I was trying to look for an exercise that we could show folks.
Sure.
I was going to get
I guess
Jonathan to switch it over to me so that we could do that.
I
sure.
apologize.
And my question has to do, I guess, with the model itself and how it gets implemented. And when the Good Lives model first came out, many of us, myself included, said if you look at the Good Life goals and how people try to get achieve these various Good Life goals, you'll find that that many dynamic risk factors are implicated within how somebody's tried to get their goals in life. So, for example, the person who's seeking out relationships and connections and overall relatedness with young people because they have a sexual interest in children. The Good Life goal is the connection and the relatedness. The roadblock to that goal is the sexual attraction to children and perhaps emotional identification or congruence with them. And the dynamic risk factors, the sexual attraction to children. I guess if you see what I'm saying. Many
Right.
folks would say you want to look at them as two sides of the same coin. What I'm hearing you guys say is one way to think about this is start just with the approach goals, have this person work towards what they want out of life, this person in particular, relatedness, relationships, connection with others, etc. And by pursuing these approach goals, you'll be creating the climate in which they can more directly address the dynamic risk factors. Is that more or less accurate?
Right. Yes. So there are a couple of things. Both you and I have been around long enough, and certainly Michelle as well. And that sounds terrible to say. I'm sorry, Michelle. I didn't mean to lump you in with us two old gray-haired buggers. But we've been in this business long enough to remember the relapse prevention model, which had its strengths, but it also had some elements to it that I think were a little bit difficult for our clients. And I often had clients say, at the end of treatment, so is that it? Is this what I have to do? I just spend the rest of my life walking down the street, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for risk to jump me. And it was very much avoidance oriented. My perspective, with all due respect to Tony Ward and all the Good Lives folks, I mean, I think many of us for a long time have been saying it's not just about the risk of reoffending, it's the risk of not having a good life. And many of us probably use those same words. The idea behind this being that we want to take into consideration that it's probably unlikely that most people who are identified as having sexual behavior problems will be allowed to just sort of live in the community unfettered in any way. So we have some boundaries with respect to risk, but most of the stuff comes in with respect to need. And that's really, where some of these things are perhaps important from a responsivity standpoint, is that helping them to understand what needs are the pertinent ones if you want to achieve that good life, and what needs are perhaps things that you need to get over or move past. And I think that the Good Lives framework has been really, really helpful. And in terms of putting this workbook together, it really did give us a wonderful experience of being able to go back and forth with our clients and say, okay, this is what we're thinking, and them saying, nah, that doesn't make sense. We go back to the drawing board. They say, why don't you try this? And that sort of process of coming to the final product as a team, I think it's been such an overly sort of overwhelmingly enjoyable experience for both us and them, and has, I think, in the process helped them to better understand exactly what it is that they need to do in order to do well in life.
Excellent. Hey, Robin, I'm gonna jump in. That was thank you so much. And actually, behind the scenes, I could even supply some research to suggest that kind of an approach could only be helpful to your clients. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. I'll keep them really, really short. One of them I was going to ask already. The first is simply, what's the youngest age you could use this curriculum with?
We developed it largely with people who are adults. I think we have at times had some folks as young as 17 or 18 in our service. I'll let Michelle and her folks up in Ontario answer that. But I mean, typically we work with adults. We do have some later age teens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would agree with you, Robin. Our population is our program is to work with individuals 18 plus. We've been definitely getting a lot more referrals for younger and younger individuals, and Robin has stated that we can go as low as 16. So I think from our program perspective, that's where the youngest we would go. Yet if I look at the book and think about it, I feel that it could be used with, you know, adolescents, early teens, 14. I don't see any difficulty. It depends on, again, how you're going to, as I think the clinician has to be savvy in how they're using it with the client that they're supporting. But, and I know that's not the greatest answer. You know, Robin's right, we deal with adults predominantly. So, but in reflection, I think around, well, how about you guys? What do you think? An early teen?
Early adolescence, for sure.
Early adolescence?
Yeah.
I think so, but again, a skillful technician will also
Sure.
repeat parts of it if they think other parts are not appropriate or relevant to the client.
Very true.
Okay, sounds good. Another question that we got is the curriculum in any way gender specific? Thoughts?
No. No, it's not gender specific.
I had to think about that, but no.
No.
Not at all.
I don't think so. You know, I'm always mindful of the fact that we did this largely with a male population. I mean, almost exclusively with a male population. I think if you were to go through it, and I think the same thing would apply to, you know, kind of early adolescent clients as well. There are some exercises that may not be appropriate. There are some things that may be more adult centric. There may be some things that are a little more male centric. There are, you know, I think there's 304 pages or more of you know, exercises in here. For each of the 10 goals, we have at least 3 or 4, sometimes 5 or 7 different exercises. There's I think, a wealth of information here. One of the questions that was asked was, could somebody see what an exercise looks like? So I just grabbed one to put it up here just quickly to show. So this is an exercise where folks are being asked what goals are important in your life. So this is a very early one. This is at the beginning of the book. And basically, what we do is we have an explanation for the people who are, you know, who are going to be part of the exercise. There are three kind of learning objectives, and we typically have 3 or more. We tell you what you need. And in fact, these worksheets are in the book as well. We tell you need pens and pencils. There are times when we'll say you need a flip chart and markers, or scissors and glue and that sort of thing. And then there are instructions to the person who is running the exercise so that they have some sense of how to do this. And then we give, you know, what we sort of think would be the time needed to complete the exercise. And you can see here's one of the worksheets for the 10 different goals. And then we have another one here, risk and protective factors, the same sort of thing. And here you say whiteboard or chart paper. You need markers, pens, and pencils, and the same sort of idea. So each exercise within the book very clearly explains what the purpose is, what you expect people are going to learn, what kind of things you need to do the exercise, some instructions for the person who's running the exercise, and then typically the amount of time that you would expect to need.
Excellent. Hey, I'm going to jump in because time is very short. We got 2 questions. I'm hoping you could provide a 5-second answer for, even though we could talk all day about them. And the first one, they kind of go together, I guess. The first one is, will this work with the impossibly unmotivated client, the one that just wants to sit there until treatment is done? The question was framed as a juvenile question, but I'm asking it as an all ages question. What can you do to gain buy-in from the client? And while I'm at it, what can you do to gain a buy-in from the staff that you mentioned were reluctant to engage in this? Some brief thoughts before we wrap up.
I think the easy answer is that a lot of these exercises are really fun. Yeah. And certainly when we were working them through with our clients, they were having fun, we were having fun. And I think, you know, we have no shortage of people who don't want to do anything as well. And I think they learn things in spite of themselves. And at the end of the process, we're able to say, you know, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
There you go. You know, you had me at scissors and glue. I was right there with you. So
Yes,
also-
always
very
safe
nice.
with scissors.
Sorry, I also want to say, David, that it's very client-centered. So it's them driving the process. So it's as Susie said, so often we don't ask our clients what their goals are. Here we are. We're asking them, what do they want in life? What are their goals? And even sometimes the most unmotivated person has something that they want to do. And in the 10 different types, we can usually find something to start. So again, we don't start with A in chapter 1 and go to chapter 2. If they want to start with relatedness, or if they want to start with creativity, or they want to start with what makes them happy, we'll start with them. And I think that helps the unmotivated client because we're asking them to give us the input. We're not driving it, they are.
Sure. Excellent. That sounds good. Jonathan, I'm going to go into the end. If you can advance the slide, I really want to say thank you to the folks from Peel Behavioral Services. I really appreciate the fact that you guys get out, that you present at conferences, and that you participate in the broader community of scientists and practitioners that are out there. So folks who are in attendance, I think I got to all of your questions. That's something of a personal milestone for me. Thanks for asking some great questions. Want to, as you can see, point out the fact that you get a special deal on Passport to Independence. It says Robin's book, but by now we know it's also the client's book as well. So you see the URL that you can click on and use the code NOVE. I'm going to take a wild guess that that is short for November, and 12 is short for, well, November 12th. So be sure to pick up a copy. I'll endorse it personally myself. That I can't imagine doing this work without it. So very good. Thanks, guys, for that. And next, Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind, next slide. And here you can just have a quick sneak peek at all of the great NERI webinars that are coming up. These really are just a fantastic experience, and a lot of really cool stuff in the offing. So sign up early, sign up often, as they say, and we'll be sure to see you there. And if I could, I just want to point out one last thing. If you go to the next slide, Jonathan, take a look at all of the folks that make these trainings possible. Oh yes, and also the CEs that you can get. Please check out the webinar section at neripress.org to look at the CEs. You can get the NERI newsletter, which has been going on, I'm proud to say, since April of 2008. Elisa Klein and I are now the co-authors, but we've been doing it a very long time. And what I really want to point out is who is sponsoring these various webinars. If you go and you look at I believe it's the next slide, you'll see that we've got some agencies that are sponsoring these webinars. You also have a ton of individuals, folks like, I know Johnny Matthew is in there from the UK, one of my other favorite people in the world. You can become a sponsor as well. It doesn't cost very much. But you can be a part of all of this. And of course, you get the 2 free NERI books, access to CE credits, and all of that other good stuff. And again, if you can we click to that next slide that has the names of everybody? I just really want to give these folks a shout out. Anyway, ooh, well, I don't know about that, but there's a nice, there we are. Yeah, folks like Kieran McGrath, who's also a really right guy. Andy Hudak out of Montana, sometimes known as Montana Andy. Mary Kay Baumgardner, who's made tons of these webinars, as well as the folks at NHASOP in Indiana, kidspeace.org, Lyndon Oaks, Specialized Assessment and Treatment Services. I just really want to give these folks all a shout out because they really make these things happen, and these are not easy to put together. So my sincere thanks to both the presenters as well as everyone at NERI Press. And again, it's great to be here. So that brings us up to 3:59 p.m. Eastern Time. I hope you all have a great evening or morning for those of you in Australia, and talk to you all soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
David.
Thanks, David.
All right, see ya.